Welcome back to our channel. Here is the list of 10 accidents in F1 that completely shook the world. Number 10. 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix. Although there were no significant casualties, Grosjean's accident with the Haas car in Bahrain has sent shockwaves throughout the racing world. The accident occurred on the opening lap of the race. Grosjean veered across the straight that runs between turns 3 and 4, clipping the oncoming car of Daniel Kvyat and being sent off the circuit towards the barriers. What followed was perhaps one of the most shocking scenes in recent Formula One history. The Haas car struck the barrier sharply while traveling at 137 miles per hour, resulting in the border being split open. The front of the car wedged within it. A large fire ensued, and it took Grosjean 32 seconds to escape from it. Although he had minor burns on his hands and legs, it was still a scene that shocked every racing fan across the globe. Number 9. Niki Lauda, Nürburgring 1976. Niki Lauda had 4 of his fellow drivers to thank for leaving his Nürburgring crash alive. Lousy weather and track coverage meant that parts of the Nürburgring circuit during the German Grand Prix were wet, while others remained dry. Lauda lost control of his Ferrari on the severely dangerous Bergwerk corner. He smashed into an earth bank, causing the car to burst into flames and bounce back onto the track where Brett Lunger hit it. The American ran to Lauda, who was trapped in his car. With the help of colleagues Harold Ertl, Arturo Rosario, and Guy Edwards, he managed to free him in a minute. Australian could walk away from the wreckage, but fell into a coma on the way to the hospital, inhaling gases that damaged his lungs. Lauda suffered harsh and permanent burns to his head, losing most of his right ear and eyelids. Still, he missed only 2 races and returned at Monza 6 weeks later, finishing 4th. The accident happened at a point on the 22.8 kilometers Nürburgring circuit, and it was near impossible for rescuers to reach. The track was pulled from the calendar the following year. Number 8. Spa-Francorchamps 1998. The rainstorm at Spa that year was so heavy that most of the cars were barely visible on the TV feed through the rain and tire spray. Although more than half the field crashed, the race was restarted an hour later using the team's spare cars. The rule was later abolished to reduce costs in F1. 4 of the 22 drivers couldn't restart the Grand Prix, and several more incidents as the race wore on, including one changing season's world champion. Michael Schumacher trailed teammate Mika Häkkinen, who had already crashed out, and tried to lap David Coulthard by just 7 points. With Scott's car barely visible through the deluge, Schumacher smashed into the back of him and severely damaged his car, forcing him to retire from the race. An angry Schumacher confronted Coulthard, so the pair had to be separated. With just 3 different races, Häkkinen went on to win that year's championship by 14 points. Number 7. Fernando Alonso and Mark Webber, Interlagos 2003. Before becoming a world champion, Fernando Alonso ignored yellow flags and debris on the track, but only once. Mark Webber's original crash was bad enough alone, but what followed was among the most hair-raising incidents people ever witnessed in Formula One. Alonso hit a wheel that had come from Webber's car, instantly destroying his suspension and sending him into the tire barrier at high speed. That wheel could have gone anywhere, so Fernando was lucky to survive without lasting injuries. He was lucky again when he was classified 3rd in the abandoned race. However, he missed the podium celebrations while being checked over. Number 6. Robert Kubica, Montreal 2007. F1 has a special level of risk involved, but we should be thankful for the latest technologies and safety in place. Without it, Robert Kubica may have suffered a serious injury and missed more than 1 race in 2007. The Canadian Grand Prix was a scary experience for Kubica. His BMW approached the hairpin on lap 27 and touched the Toyota of Jarno Trulli, losing part of his front wing and hitting a lump in the grass by the side of the track. The nose of his car was lifted into the air, and Kubica hit the sidewall at 142 miles per hour and cartwheeled across the track before striking the opposite wall. Marshals removed Kubica under the safety car, and he was taken to a hospital in Montreal. Luckily, the polished driver was relatively unscathed and was talking almost normally. Kubica missed the US Grand Prix but returned for the French GP the following race week. Number 5. Mark Webber, Valencia 2010. Massive accidents are becoming rarer in the recent few years. However, this one was a stark reminder of the dangers that still exist even in our modern F1. Webber hit the back of Kovalainen's Lotus at almost 200 miles per hour and was launched into the air in a spectacular backflip. He was going so high that he wiped out an advertising hoarding and landed upside down. After a short slide, the car righted itself and Webber hit the barrier, still going at a fair rate of knots. Although the crash looked atrocious, Mark Webber only suffered a delayed concussion. Number 4. 1982 Belgian Grand Prix, Gilles Villeneuve. In 1982, Gilles Villeneuve was hyping the Formula One. The Belgian Grand Prix was the 5th race of the season. Before every race, drivers must engage in a qualifying session to set the starting lineup. In the last qualifying session, Villeneuve was 0.1 seconds behind Didier Pironi for 6th place, so he returned to the track to improve his time. He drove over the hill and approached a much slower car, confused about which side he should pass on. A moment of confusion led to him rear-ending the car and sending him airborne. Villeneuve's car flipped many times, and he was thrown from the vehicle into a nearby fence, a horrifying scene. Medical staff took Villeneuve away on a helicopter, but unfortunately, he had a fatal neck fracture. He was on life support for a while but died later that evening. It's undoubtedly one of the worst F1 crashes we've ever seen. Thankfully, we've seen safety go a long way to prevent that. Number 3. San Marino Grand Prix of 1994. Probably the most high-profile crash in F1 history, it brought about some of the most sweeping changes seen in the sport. It was Roland Ratzenberger's 3rd race in Formula One. During the second qualifying session, Ratzenberger went off the track at the Aqua Mineral chicane. With his sponsor in attendance for the first time, Roland decided to carry on after checking the car to the best of his abilities. He didn't know that the minor incident had damaged his front wing, and as he tried to turn into the high downforce Villeneuve corner, it broke and lodged under the car. Roland crashed into the outside wall at 195.6 miles per hour. Ratzenberger was transferred to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead upon arrival. He had suffered 3 different fatal injuries. Everyone was left shaken by Ratzenberger's death, especially Ayrton Senna, a 3-time world champion still widely considered one of the most excellent F1 drivers in history. He contemplated whether he would even race in the following day's Grand Prix, but ultimately decided to compete. On the race day, Senna lost control of his car and hit a concrete wall at around 190 miles per hour. The impact force sent part of the suspension back into the cockpit, fatally injuring Senna. After his death, some of the many changes included limiting engine size and power and raising cockpit sides to offer drivers more protection. The suspension also changed to prevent wheels from becoming disconnected. Number 2. 2014 Japan Grand Prix, Jules Bianchi. The improved safety measures from the 1994 San Marino saved many racers for 20 years. Unfortunately, we saw another tragedy in the 2014 Japan Grand Prix. German driver Adrian Sutil lost control on lap 42 of a rain-drenched Japanese Grand Prix. He crashed his Sauber, prompting a recovery vehicle to be called out. A lap later, Bianchi lost control on the same corner and crashed at 78 miles per hour into the 6,500 kilograms crane-clearing Sutil's car. The crash destroyed his roll bar, making the car slide underneath the crane. When safety officials removed him from his car, Bianchi was unconscious. The weather was terrible, so they couldn't fly him to the hospital. Bianchi suffered a severe head injury, underwent surgery, and was placed into an induced coma, remaining comatose until his death a few months later. There were many controversies surrounding the accident. Some believed the official's mistake was waving a green flag through that area. Others believed there should have been a safety car. Bianchi's crash led to F1 implementing closed cockpits. A closed cockpit could have saved Bianchi from that accident. Number 1. 1978 Italian Grand Prix, Ronnie Peterson. This Italian Grand Prix was one of the season's final races. Mario Andretti led the standings, while Ronnie Peterson and Niki Lauda were close behind. After a crash in practice, Peterson had a rough start to the weekend. He had to start the race with an older model car. It was a weird start to the race since the green light came on before all the cars were on the line. That made the drivers in the back have a running start, making James Hunt crash into the back of Peterson's car and causing it to veer right into the barrier. The car burst into flames, with him momentarily trapped inside. A few drivers, including Hunt, helped him so medical officials could tend to him. X-rays in the hospital revealed that Peterson suffered 27 fractures in his legs. Even with the injuries, Peterson had a chance to survive the crash. Unfortunately, his condition took a turn for the worst overnight. He was declared dead the following morning. What makes the event more tragic is that it was totally avoidable. A technical error with the green light caused chaos, and without it, there would likely be no crash. But what do you think? Do you remember any other F1 accidents? Share your opinion in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss an upload and you can enjoy the excellent content we send your way.